I didn't think he'd actually kick me out. That's what I need everyone to understand first. I thought my suggestion was reasonable, open-minded, progressive. I thought casually proposing that we add his best friend to our relationship would demonstrate my evolved thinking about love and partnership. I thought my boyfriend would be intrigued, or at least willing to discuss it seriously. I thought this was a mature conversation between adults. I was catastrophically wrong about all of that. My boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend now, his name is Derek. We'd been together for 3 years, living together for the past year and a half in his apartment that he owned. Really solid, stable relationship by every conventional measure. Loving, secure, comfortable. The kind of relationship where we talked about getting engaged soon. Where we'd started looking at rings casually. Where marriage and kids felt like the natural, inevitable next step. Derek's best friend is named Cameron. They'd been best friends since college, over a decade of friendship. Cameron was around constantly. Game nights, weekend trips, dinners at our place, us at his place. Integrated into our lives completely. Nice guy, successful, single for the past year after a difficult breakup. I'd always gotten along with him well. But over the past 6 months or so, I'd started noticing Cameron in completely different ways that I knew weren't entirely appropriate. Started finding him increasingly attractive physically. Started paying attention when he talked in ways that felt more than friendly. Started thinking about him in contexts that definitely weren't platonic, given that I was in a committed relationship with his best friend. Started having persistent fantasies that involved both Derek and Cameron together with me. Started wondering obsessively what it would be like if somehow the three of us could all be together romantically and sexually. I'd been reading extensively about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy for about 4 months at that point. It had started somewhat innocuously with articles about alternative relationship structures that showed up in my social media feeds and caught my attention. Progressed gradually to listening to podcasts, specifically about people in successful triads and thruples, hearing them talk about how happy and fulfilled they were. Deepened substantially into reading entire books about polyamorous relationship structures and how to navigate them successfully. I'd convinced myself over those months that maybe I was fundamentally polyamorous at my core. That maybe traditional monogamy was unnecessarily restrictive and outdated and didn't serve modern humans well. That maybe loving multiple people simultaneously was not only possible but actually beautiful and evolved. And very specifically, I'd started obsessively imagining a relationship structure where Derek, Cameron, and I could all be together as equal partners. A committed triad, a thruple. All three of us in one unified relationship together. It seemed absolutely perfect in my mind when I fantasized about it. I genuinely loved Derek and our relationship. I was increasingly attracted to Cameron both physically and emotionally. They were already best friends with incredibly deep bonds and history together. We all got along amazingly well as a group. We already spent enormous amounts of time together anyway, given Cameron's constant presence. Why not make it official and romantic and sexual? It seemed like such an elegant solution to allow me to have both of them. I'd tried cautiously to gauge Derek's interest and openness a few times over the past couple months, testing the waters carefully. Would make casual comments about how close he and Cameron were, how special their friendship was. Would joke lightly about how Cameron was practically living with us already given how often he was over. Would mention articles I'd read about successful polyamorous triads, trying to present them as interesting rather than as proposals. Derek had seemed visibly uncomfortable each time I brought up anything related to polyamory or non-monogamy, but he hadn't explicitly shut down the conversations completely or told me never to mention it again. So I'd held on to desperate hope that he might potentially be somewhat open to at least discussing the idea if I presented it properly with the right framing and language. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. The conversation that ended my 3-year relationship happened on a completely ordinary Tuesday evening in late October. Derek and I were having dinner at home. Just a regular weeknight dinner I'd cooked, pasta with chicken, nothing special or significant about the meal, or the timing, or the setting. We were sitting at our small dining table talking about our days at work. Cameron had been over the night before for Monday night football, like he was nearly every week, and had left some of his stuff at our place, a hoodie and his reusable water bottle. Derek mentioned casually that he'd dropped the items off at Cameron's apartment the next day after work, and I saw what I thought was my perfect opening. My carefully planned moment to casually float the idea I'd been thinking about obsessively for months, rehearsing different versions in my head, imagining how the conversation would go. "You know," I said in what I thought was a casual conversational tone, like I was discussing weekend plans or suggesting we try a new restaurant. Cameron's been single for a while now. Over a year since his breakup with Jennifer, right? And he's over here constantly, like multiple times every single week. Have you ever thought about, maybe evolving our relationship structure to include him in a more official romantic capacity? Derek looked up slowly from his plate, his fork pausing midway to his mouth, expression shifting from relaxed to confused. "What do you mean exactly?" "I mean romantically and sexually," I said, still desperately trying to maintain that casual, non-threatening tone I'd practiced. "Like, the 3 of us together as equal partners. A triad, a throuple. I've been doing extensive reading about polyamorous relationship structures over the past few months, and I genuinely think it could work really beautifully for the 3 of us specifically." The look on Derek's face shifted rapidly from confused to something I couldn't quite read. Maybe shocked, maybe hurt, maybe angry, maybe all 3 competing. "You want to add Cameron to our relationship? My best friend Cameron, the guy I've known since sophomore year of college?" "I think it could be really beautiful and evolved," I said, warming to my pitch now that I was actually saying these words out loud after months of internal preparation. "Think about it. We all get along incredibly well together. We already spend so much time together anyway. He's single and available. We have amazing chemistry as a group. We could build something really special and evolved and modern. A committed triad where we're all equal partners loving each other." "Are you attracted to Cameron?" Derek asked slowly, carefully, setting his fork down completely now and giving me his full attention. I hesitated, suddenly realizing this question was a trap, but not knowing how to avoid it. "I mean, objectively speaking, he's an attractive person." "That's not what I asked you," Derek interrupted, voice harder now. "I didn't ask if he's objectively attractive. I asked if you personally are attracted to him. Do you have feelings for him? Do you want to be with him romantically and sexually? I think I could develop genuine romantic feelings in the context of a polyamorous structure where we're all committed to building something together." "So yes," Derek interrupted again, voice flat. "You're attracted to my best friend and you want to date him and sleep with him while also staying with me. That's what you're actually asking for here. It's not dating him separately while staying with you. It's all of us being together as one cohesive relationship unit," I corrected, using the precise language I'd learned and memorized from my months of research. "A triad is fundamentally different from you having a girlfriend, while I separately have a boyfriend. It's the 3 of us in one relationship, all committed to each other equally, all intimate with each other." Derek set his fork down very carefully and deliberately on his plate, sat back in his chair, looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before in 3 years together. "And you've been thinking about this for how long exactly?" "A few months," I admitted, immediately wishing I'd lied. "A few months," he repeated slowly, like he was testing how the words sounded out loud. "You've been thinking about fucking my best friend for several months, and you're now casually suggesting over Tuesday dinner that we make it happen. That we invite him into our relationship so you can act on these feelings you've been developing. That's a really reductive and honestly unfair way to frame what I'm genuinely proposing here. Then, how would you frame it? Derek asked sharply, leaning forward. Go ahead. Explain to me how suggesting we add my best friend, the guy I've been close with for over a decade, to our relationship is anything other than you wanting to sleep with him and wanting my permission to make that happen. I think polyamory is a completely valid relationship structure that allows people to love multiple people simultaneously and authentically without the artificial restrictions of traditional monogamy, I said, using phrases I'd essentially memorized from articles and podcasts. I think a committed triad could actually strengthen our relationship rather than threaten it. I think Cameron would be a wonderful addition to what we already have. I think the three of us could build something really special together. Does Cameron know anything about this idea of yours? Derek asked pointedly, eyes narrowed. Not yet, no. I wanted to discuss it with you first, obviously. How thoughtful of you, Derek said, voice dripping with heavy sarcasm. So you haven't asked Cameron if he even wants to be in a polyamorous, romantic and sexual relationship with his best friend and his best friend's girlfriend. You haven't checked if he's interested in any of this before suggesting we upend our entire relationship. I wanted to make absolutely sure you were open to exploring the idea before approaching him about it. How incredibly considerate, Derek interrupted. And what if I say no right now? What if I tell you I have absolutely zero interest in sharing you with my best friend? Zero interest in watching you develop romantic and sexual relationships with him? Zero interest in any of this? Then I guess we'd need to have a deeper, more serious conversation about whether traditional monogamy is really serving us optimally as partners. Derek stood up from the table abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Get out. What? I stared at him in shock. Get out of my apartment, he said, voice completely flat and emotionless, in a way that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. Pack your things and leave, tonight. Derek, you're completely overreacting to this. I'm not overreacting even slightly, he said calmly. I'm reacting perfectly appropriately to what you just told me. You just informed me that you want to fuck my best friend, that you've been fantasizing about fucking him for months, and you dressed it up in polyamory language, thinking that would somehow make it acceptable or reasonable. You've been fantasizing about him for months while living with me, and you thought you could casually suggest adding him to our relationship over dinner, like you're suggesting we get a dog or repaint the living room. I thought we could have a mature adult conversation about this. We just had one, Derek said flatly, and my mature adult response is that I want you out of my apartment and out of my life. I'm done. We're done. This relationship is completely over. You're breaking up with me just because I suggested exploring polyamory. I'm breaking up with you because you're attracted to my best friend and you want to sleep with him, Derek corrected sharply. The polyamory framing is just your manipulative way of trying to make cheating sound enlightened and progressive. It's just fancy language to dress up betrayal. I haven't cheated on you at all. You've been thinking about him romantically and sexually for months, Derek interrupted, fantasizing about him, researching how to make a relationship with him happen, reading about triads and thruples. And now you're asking my permission to pursue him while staying with me and acting like this is some evolved relationship philosophy. That's emotional cheating, even if you haven't physically done anything with him yet. I was being honest about my feelings instead of hiding them. You were being selfish, Derek interrupted forcefully. You want me, and you want Cameron, and you thought you could have both by calling it polyamory and framing it as evolved thinking. But I don't want that. I don't want to share you with anyone, let alone my best friend. I don't want to watch you be romantic with him. I don't want to watch you sleep with him. I don't want any part of this fantasy you've constructed, so you need to leave my apartment right now. I tried desperately to argue, tried to explain that I was just opening a conversation, not making demands, that I hadn't meant we had to actually do it, that I was just exploring ideas and possibilities, that we could forget the whole thing if he was uncomfortable. but Derek was completely done, utterly finished with me and the conversation. He walked directly to our shared bedroom and started methodically pulling my clothes out of the closet we'd shared, started packing my things into the suitcases we'd used for our beach vacation together just 3 months earlier. "What are you doing?" I asked, following him into the bedroom in panic. "Helping you pack since you're clearly not moving fast enough on your own," he said with that same calm, detached efficiency. He was methodically folding my clothes into a suitcase. "Derek, please, can we just talk about this rationally? You have exactly 2 options right now," he said without even looking at me. "Option 1, you can pack your things yourself right now with dignity and leave voluntarily. Option 2, I can pack everything for you and put it all in the hallway outside my apartment. Your choice. You have 30 seconds. I stood there frozen in shock, watching my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I'd been talking about marrying, casually pack my belongings like I was a house guest who'd overstayed their welcome. Watched him empty my dresser drawers methodically. Watched him box up all my bathroom stuff and cosmetics. Watched him pull my shoes out of our shared closet. Watched him systematically remove every single piece of evidence that I'd ever lived there. "I'll stay with my sister tonight," I said finally, voice breaking. "But we absolutely should talk about this tomorrow when you've had time to calm down and process." "I am calm," Derek said flatly, still packing. "This is me completely calm. This is me making a clear decision based on the information you gave me. You want to be with Cameron. You've been fantasizing about Cameron for months. Go be with Cameron. Just not while pretending to be in a committed relationship with me." He finished packing 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag with my immediate necessities: clothes, shoes, toiletries, laptop, important documents. Carried all of them to the front door. Set them down in a neat row. Stood there waiting for me to leave, arms crossed. I grabbed my purse, my phone, my car keys with shaking hands. Looked around the apartment I'd called home for a 1.5 years, at the furniture we'd picked out together, at the photos on the walls from our trips, at the life we'd built. "Derek, I love you. This was just a stupid idea. We can forget I ever said anything." "I can't forget it," he said quietly, finally meeting my eyes. "I can't forget that you spent months thinking about my best friend romantically. I can't forget that you researched polyamory to justify pursuing him. I can't forget that you thought it was acceptable to casually suggest over dinner that we add him to our relationship. I can't unknow any of that, so we're done. Take your things and go." I grabbed my suitcases, tears streaming down my face, and walked out of the apartment I'd lived in with Derek. Heard the door close behind me with devastating finality. Stood in the hallway for a moment staring at the closed door. Then carried my hastily packed belongings to my car and drove to my sister's apartment in a daze. "Neoshosao enes akaum. Yana al." I know I stayed with my sister that first night after Derek kicked me out, showing up at her door after 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, with 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and tears streaming down my face. She took one look at me and ushered me inside without questions, made tea, let me cry for 20 minutes, then asked what happened. I told her the whole story, about Cameron, about developing feelings, about months of polyamory research, about the casual dinner conversation suggestion, about Derek immediately kicking me out and packing my bags. "You told Derek you want to date his best friend, and you're genuinely surprised he broke up with you?" my sister asked with a mix of sympathy and incredulity. I suggested exploring polyamory together as partners. "You suggested sleeping with Cameron while staying with Derek," she corrected bluntly. "That's what you actually proposed, even if you used polyamory words. You asked your boyfriend if you could date and sleep with his best friend. It's a completely valid relationship structure for many people. For people who actually want it," my sister interrupted. "For people who discuss it early in relationships. Did Derek ever once indicate he was interested in polyamory, in sharing you with other people, in watching you be romantic with his best friend specifically?" "Not explicitly, but he never said he was completely opposed to the concept," So no, my sister said flatly. He never indicated any interest whatsoever. And you asked anyway because you wanted Cameron. And now you're shocked that Derek ended things immediately. I tried reaching out to Derek over the next several days, via text, email, even calling, though he never answered. Sent him long messages trying to explain that I'd just been opening a conversation, not making demands, that I hadn't actually meant we had to do it, that it was just an idea I'd been exploring intellectually, that we could absolutely forget the whole thing ever happened, that I loved him and only him. He responded exactly once, 3 days after kicking me out, with a short, brutal text. I can't forget you spent months fantasizing about my best friend and then asked permission to date him. I can't unknow that you're not satisfied with just me. I can't go back to how things were before I knew you wanted someone else. We're done. Please don't contact me again. I tried messaging Cameron directly, thinking maybe he could talk to Derek for me. Explain that I'd just been exploring ideas, help smooth things over, maybe mediate some kind of conversation. Cameron's response was ice cold and immediate. Derek told me everything you suggested. I'm his best friend and I have been for over 10 years. I would never betray him like that. What you suggested was fucked up. Don't contact me again either. Both of them. Gone from my life completely, totally cut off, because I'd suggested something I genuinely thought was progressive and evolved. My boyfriend of 3 years, and his best friend, who'd become my friend too, both refusing to speak to me. My friend Maya came over to my sister's cramped guest room about a week and a half after everything fell apart. I texted her asking if we could talk, told her the whole story over coffee, expecting sympathy or understanding. Instead, she said exactly what I needed to hear, but absolutely didn't want to accept. You wanted to sleep with Cameron, and you tried to manipulate Derek into agreeing to it by framing it as polyamory, Maya said, with uncomfortable bluntness. You spent months fantasizing about his best friend. You researched specifically how to make a throuple work, and then you casually suggested it over Tuesday dinner. What did you possibly think would happen? I thought he'd at least be willing to discuss it seriously. Why would he discuss whether you can date and sleep with his best friend? Maya asked incredulously. That's not reasonable to most people. That's not something the vast majority would even consider. You essentially told him you're not satisfied with just him, and you want to add someone else. Specifically, someone he's incredibly close to. Of course, he ended things immediately. I was being honest about my feelings instead of hiding them. You were being selfish, Maya interrupted sharply. If you genuinely wanted polyamory as a relationship orientation, you would have discussed it way before moving in together, before talking about engagement. Instead, you waited until you had developed specific feelings for a specific person, his best friend, and then suggested opening things up. That's not polyamory as an orientation. That's wanting permission to cheat with someone you're attracted to. She was absolutely right, and I knew it deep down, even though hearing it felt awful. I hadn't wanted polyamory as a general relationship structure or identity. I'd wanted Derek specifically to agree, to let me pursue Cameron specifically while staying with Derek. I'd wanted both of them simultaneously. And I'd thought, using polyamory language and framing it as an equal triad would somehow make it acceptable and even enlightened. Tsenafanalekinum osa asi bim ensa iki. It's been 8 months since Derek casually packed my bags and ended our 3-year relationship over one dinner conversation. 8 months since I suggested adding Cameron to our relationship and lost absolutely everything that mattered. I see Derek occasionally on social media through mutual friends who haven't unfriended me yet. He looks genuinely happy, truly happy in ways I remember from early in our relationship. Dating someone new now who apparently wants exactly what he wants, traditional exclusive monogamous commitment with no additions or expansions. Someone who doesn't suggest adding other people to their relationship. Someone who's completely satisfied with just him without needing anyone else. I tried actively pursuing the polyamorous life I'd claimed to want so desperately. Downloaded all the apps specifically for non-monogamous people. Created profiles explaining I was interested in ethical non-monogamy and polyamorous structures. Met numerous people who said they were interested in polyamory and open relationships. Went on dozens of dates trying to build the multiple meaningful committed relationships I'd convinced myself I needed. Tried specifically to find people interested in forming triads or thruples like I'd imagined with Derek and Cameron. Couldn't make any of it actually work at all. Couldn't find people who wanted the same specific triad structure I'd envisioned. Couldn't find two people who both wanted to be in a committed equal partnership triad together with me simultaneously. Couldn't recreate even remotely the specific fantasy I'd built in my head, obsessively about Derek, Cameron, and me all being together happily as one cohesive relationship unit. The people I met who were interested in polyamory either wanted completely different structures, like having multiple separate relationships rather than one unified triad, or they weren't interested in the same level of commitment I was looking for. The few people I connected with who did want triads wanted to form them with people they'd carefully selected together as a couple, not join an existing person's fantasy, and nobody, absolutely nobody, wanted to be someone's backup plan or consolation prize for losing the specific people they'd actually wanted. The brutal truth I eventually had to face and fully accept was that I'd never genuinely wanted polyamory as a fundamental relationship orientation or deeply held identity. I'd wanted very specific permission to pursue one very specific person, Cameron, Derek's best friend, while simultaneously keeping another very specific person, Derek, my stable loving boyfriend, as my secure foundation and life partner. I'd been attracted to one particular individual who happened to be my boyfriend's closest friend, and I'd researched polyamory and triads very specifically as a way to intellectually justify and rationalize pursuing him guilt-free without having to actually choose between the two men I wanted. When I couldn't have the specific triad configuration I'd imagined with those two specific men in that specific structure, I discovered I had absolutely no authentic interest in polyamory as a general lifestyle or relationship philosophy. I hadn't wanted to love multiple people. I'd wanted to love Derek and Cameron specifically. I hadn't wanted an open relationship or ethical non-monogamy in general. I'd wanted permission to date Cameron specifically while keeping Derek specifically. And when that exact scenario wasn't possible anymore, the entire house of cards collapsed, and I realized I'd never actually believed in any of it beyond wanting both of them. The brutal truth I eventually had to face and accept was that I'd never genuinely wanted polyamory as a fundamental relationship orientation or identity. I'd wanted very specific permission to pursue one very specific person, Cameron, while keeping another very specific person, Derek, as my secure foundation and life partner. I'd been attracted to one particular individual person who happened to be my boyfriend's best friend, and I'd researched polyamory and triads specifically as a way to intellectually justify pursuing him without having to actually choose between them. When I couldn't have the specific triad configuration I'd imagined with those two specific men, I had absolutely no interest in polyamory as a general lifestyle or relationship structure, and I'd destroyed my relationship, my solid 3-year relationship, where we'd been actively talking about engagement rings and wedding timelines, and having kids together and building a whole future, because I'd prioritized an elaborate fantasy about his best friend over the actual real tangible thing we had together, because I'd thought I could casually suggest something absolutely devastating and relationship-ending and life-changing over a random Tuesday weeknight dinner like it was no big deal. Because I'd convinced myself that framing my attraction to Cameron as polyamorous identity rather than simple cheating made it reasonable and progressive and acceptable, rather than recognizing it as emotional betrayal and manipulative selfishness. We'd had plans, concrete plans. We were going to get engaged within the next 6 months. Derek had even shown me rings he was considering, had asked about my preferences. We'd talked about a spring wedding, about buying a house together instead of renting Derek's apartment, about trying for a baby within a couple years after marriage, about the life we were going to build, the family we were going to create, the future we were mapping out together. All of it gone, completely destroyed, because I developed feelings for Cameron, and instead of working through those feelings or ending my relationship honestly, I tried to manipulate Derek into giving me permission to pursue both of them by calling it a triad and using polyamory terminology. I think about that conversation constantly, obsessively, painfully, unable to stop replaying it in my mind. About sitting across from Derek at our small dining table, casually suggesting we add Cameron to our relationship like it was a minor adjustment rather than a relationship-ending bombshell. About using carefully chosen phrases like evolving our relationship structure and committed triad and equal partners, and genuinely believing those progressive-sounding words made my request acceptable and reasonable and worth discussing. About his face changing rapidly as he understood what I was actually asking for. Permission to pursue his best friend, romantically and sexually. About him standing up from dinner and telling me to get out immediately. About watching him pack my things with that calm, detached, systematic efficiency that was somehow infinitely more devastating than yelling or anger would have been. About realizing far too late that I'd just destroyed everything over one dinner conversation. I replay different versions in my head obsessively. What if I'd never said anything? What if I'd worked through my attraction to Cameron privately instead of trying to act on it? What if I'd been honest with Derek months earlier before things got so deep? What if I'd recognized that developing feelings for someone else meant I needed to either end my relationship or recommit to it fully, not try to manipulate my way into having both? But none of those hypotheticals matter now. I made my choice. I suggested adding Cameron, and Derek ended everything immediately without hesitation. I understand now, with painful crystal clarity, what I did wrong on every level. I developed genuine romantic and sexual feelings for someone else while in a committed monogamous relationship, and instead of addressing that honestly, either by ending my relationship or working through those feelings, I tried to find a way to have both men simultaneously. I researched polyamory not because I genuinely identified with it as an orientation or deeply believed in it as a philosophy, but specifically because I wanted intellectual justification for pursuing Cameron without losing Derek. I proposed adding Derek's best friend to our relationship, thinking the polyamory framing and triad language made it an acceptable, reasonable request rather than recognizing it as devastating betrayal. I was catastrophically wrong about absolutely everything, and I understand completely why Derek left immediately without hesitation, why he packed my bags that same night, why he removed me from his apartment within 2 hours of that conversation, why he never spoke to me again afterward, why he blocked me on everything, because I'd shown him explicitly that I wanted someone else, specifically his closest friend, who he'd known longer than he'd known me, and expected him to accept and embrace it because I called it a triad and used polyamory terminology, because I'd essentially asked permission to pursue a romantic and sexual relationship with his best friend while staying with him, because I'd prioritized my attraction to Cameron over my commitment to Derek and our future together. I casually suggested adding his best friend Cameron to our relationship over Tuesday dinner, thought I was being open-minded and progressive and evolved, thought polyamory language made it a reasonable, mature proposal worth discussing, thought we could have a calm, rational conversation about restructuring our relationship to include his best friend. He casually packed my bags and ended everything that same night within hours, removed me completely from his apartment and his life without hesitation or second thoughts. and taught me the hardest, most painful lesson I've ever learned in my entire life. That you can't develop romantic and sexual feelings for someone else and then try to manipulate your partner into accepting it by calling it polyamory or dressing it up in progressive relationship terminology. That suggesting a throuple with your partner's best friend, the person they're closest to, the person they've known longer than they've known you, isn't evolved or open-minded or progressive. It's devastating and cruel and fundamentally disrespectful of the relationship you already have. That some conversations don't just open doors to new possibilities and growth, they end relationships completely and permanently with no possibility of recovery. I learned by losing absolutely everything that mattered to me. By getting kicked out of the apartment I'd shared with Derek for 1.5 years. By watching him systematically pack my belongings with that calm, detached efficiency that showed me exactly how done he was. By understanding far too late that wanting to add one specific person to your relationship, especially your partner's best friend, doesn't mean you're polyamorous as an orientation or identity. It means you're attracted to someone else and desperately looking for permission and justification to pursue them without having to give up the security and stability of your existing relationship. It means you want to have everything without having to choose or sacrifice anything. The apartment I'd lived in with Derek, the engagement we'd been talking about, the future we'd been planning, the life we'd been building, all of it gone in one Tuesday evening over one dinner conversation because I couldn't be satisfied with what I had, because I developed feelings for someone I shouldn't have developed feelings for, because I convinced myself that polyamory terminology would make my attraction to his best friend acceptable, because I thought I could have both of them if I just framed it properly and used the right progressive language about evolved relationship structures. I casually suggested adding his best friend to our relationship over a Tuesday dinner. Thought I was being open-minded and evolved and mature about relationships. Thought polyamory language made it a reasonable proposal worth discussing seriously. Thought we could have a calm, rational conversation about restructuring our entire relationship to include his closest friend. He casually packed my bags and ended everything that same night, removed me from his apartment and his life without hesitation, never spoke to me again, blocked me on everything, moved on to someone who wanted what he wanted, exclusive monogamous commitment without additions or complications, and taught me that some requests aren't just inappropriate, they're relationship ending, that you can't casually suggest adding your partner's best friend to your relationship and expect anything other than immediate breakup. That polyamory framing doesn't make betrayal acceptable. That wanting someone else while in a committed relationship means you need to make a choice, not try to manipulate your way into having both.